Nah, you're an idiot, mate.
Stand down now.
Australia is on fire.
You from the media, tell the Prime Minister to go and get...
And people are turning their anger on the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison.
You're out, son! You are out!
So what happened to Morrison?
I have always believed in miracles.
And his miracles? A man who as tourism boss signed off on this famous, or perhaps infamous, advert.
We turned on the lights. So where the bloody hell are you?
Where it was this very catchphrase that came back to bite Morrison hard. As fires ravaged the country in the lead up to Christmas, and some politicians were spotted helping out, it emerged that the Prime Minister was on an unannounced holiday in Hawaii. And despite days of public outcry, he only cut his vacation short by about 48 hours. But his actions once back on Australian soil didn't do much to improve the situation. The Prime Minister's decision to compensate volunteer firefighters only came after weeks of pressure from the opposition, and after claiming that the firefighters want to be out there. In the period from Christmas to New Year, as the fires reached catastrophic levels, Mr. Morrison made just one public appearance, despite finding time to host a cricket reception and hit the beach. While on another beach, the world saw unprecedented scenes of Australians huddling to escape the fires, as Morrison toured the country seemingly unable to secure a single handshake.
How are you?
I'm only shaking your hand if you give more funding to our RFS. So many people here have lost their homes.
The solution, from a Prime Minister who prides himself in his marketing acumen, a promotional video complete with upbeat music and for a short while a link for donations to his own party. To make matters worse, on a visit to an island affected by fires, Morrison appeared not to realise lives had been lost there.
Two. I was thinking about firefighters.
For some of his critics, the Prime Minister's failure has been one of leadership in the face of an immediate disaster. For others, it's a failure to address the wider context of climate change.
This has to stop. We can't keep forgetting and pretending that climate change isn't real.
He has, however, acknowledged climate change in recent press conferences.
Climate change has impacted on the world weather patterns that have led to where we are here today to some extent.
The ruling Liberal Party does not have a robust record of taking climate change seriously, though. Back in 2015, ministers were caught joking about rising sea levels affecting Pacific Island nations.
Emissions today are 50 million tonnes less on average each year under our government than under the previous government.
But that's not the whole picture. Our reduction targets are based on how much Australia was emitting in 2005, which was 611 megatonnes of carbon. Our Paris 2030 target is approximately 450 megatonnes, a 26 to 28% reduction on 2005 levels. And with Labor's carbon tax in place, by 2013, we were already almost halfway there, clocking a 12% reduction. So that
50 million tonnes
lower
on average each year.
Well, that actually takes credit for all the heavy lifting Labor did when it was in power. So averaging it out over Labor years is kind of misleading.
He's calculating the emissions reduction that we achieved in our 6 years of government and matching it against their emissions reduction, which has been absolutely zero.
Yep, because then the coalition bumped Labor out of office and axed the tax. In the 7 years since, emission reductions have basically flatlined, slowing from a 2.4% annual drop under Labor to a melting glacial rate of 0.18% and putting us on track to fall well short of our Paris target.
Although we've got an electricity sector which is becoming increasingly decarbonised and emissions are going down, we have the whole liquefied natural gas industry pumping up. And that means we've got more emissions coming from that sector.
So how on warming Earth are we going to
meet and beat a target
by using carbon credits from the extra emissions that we didn't make in meeting and beating our cushy Kyoto target? And if that sounds like smoke and mirrors, it kind of is. As the Climate Council puts it, it's like trying to buy a loaf of bread from one store with expired vouchers from a different store. We're the only country openly planning to use carryover credits, and around 100 countries want them banned.
They're basically just hot air that don't really exist as real action and real emissions reductions now. It's not a question of if, but it's a question of when Australia is going to be impacted economically by other countries around the world who are taking this seriously.
So what will it take for our leaders to ditch the accounting tricks and take meaningful action before it's too late? Now, it's interesting, the Australia Institute have given us some polling that they've done. They do it all the time, and it hasn't been released yet. It's really interesting. It's remarkable data. If we can just bring it up, 47% of Australians are very concerned about climate change. Now, what's interesting about that is the 10% change from just 6 months ago. So you'd have to think that the impact of the fires has had a real significant impact on that. The next one is that 57% of us, we are experiencing a lot of the impacts of climate change, they believe. Now, that's up by 14% on where it was at just 6 months ago. And the third interesting piece of data, I think, from all of the research, 73% of Australians, those polled by the Australia Institute, agree that leadership on the bushfire response by the Prime Minister, it required more leadership. So basically it's a critique of his leadership. That also is played out in the Essential poll that we see out today, and I suppose the news poll from earlier in the week. And the last bit of research, 78%, or almost 4 out of 5 Australians are worried that Australia's native forests and, of course, our unique wildlife, we've seen stories about this all week, will never, ever be the same again. So I guess